I am Aaron Gearhart. I'm the gallery director for the Alliance for the Arts. And it is my pleasure to have Alexander tonight and also Jessica Todd on behalf of the Plays Well with Others exhibition in our venue until October 17th. And we had last week, Friday was the opening reception. We did a completely virtual opening reception. It was a blast. We had a lot of fun. Jessica did an amazing job walking through each one of the pieces, and it gets a really good feel of how the exhibit is to actually walk through, because she had a cinematographer follow her around and walk her through the pieces, and she could really delve into the depths of each artist and how they interacted between the other works in the show. So I encourage you, I'll send you all the link. We just released today a special preview with some of our members, but I'll send you all the link to that YouTube video after this conversation. So the exhibit Plays Well with Others, curated by Jessica Todd. She's on the line here. We'll introduce you to her shortly. And I just want to send out a special thank you to Alexander for being willing to do an artist talk Q&A. We've been doing these with various artists through the past several months, and it's a great opportunity to really have a personal conversation and delve into some of the specifics of your work and get to just have a little fun with presenting in a different format. So thank you, Alexander. And without further ado, I'll introduce the curator, Jessica Todd, and have her say a few words. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things about her and how she got familiarized with Alexander's work, because that backstory there of how those two came to be. I think, Alexander, the first time I saw your work was when you had a show at the Alliance. I wasn't actually an employee there yet, but working down in another city down the road and showing with an old friend of mine from way back, I think from undergrad days. So it was really nice to see some of your work really stood out, and I'm delighted to see more of it and hear more about you and your whole process. So without further ado, I'll give it over to Jessica to tell a little bit about that and a little bit about the exhibit, and then we'll get into some of Alexander's work.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay? So thank you, Aaron, for digitally having us. Hi, Alexander. You look fabulous somehow on internet camera. I don't understand. Teach me your ways. I'm so excited to hear you speak about your work. So yeah, just real quick, my background. I did an MFA in jewelry metals. I ended up after that down in Captiva, Florida at the Rauschenberg residency. I was the residency manager for almost 6 years. And that kind of led me into this passion for wanting to kind of find different ways to support artists, which led me to curating, and decided I was going to just go ahead and curate a show, and started working on concepts, and kind of came up with this idea of a show about play, and talked to Aaron and got the venue. And in the meantime, Alexander was someone that I had on my radar for a really long time. I also saw their show at the Alliance and was quite taken. I was like, yes, this is so good and different and just exciting. And as a jeweler, there was something about it that really felt like jewelry for the wall to me. I mean that in like the best way as a jeweler. And it was just really exciting work. And so it was in my mind, and I was planning this show at the Alliance and kind of figuring out what I could afford, because I was putting the show off kind of by myself, and ended up getting this grant from the city of Fort Myers. And as soon as I got it, I was like, great, I can afford to ship artwork Illinois. So, and immediately emailed Alexander, who is such a good sport, and it was like a little last minute, and was like, yeah, man, let's do it. And like immediately came up with this amazing concept, and just did it, got it done, did a video, and like boom. So it was super awesome. I'm so excited to have the work in the show. And you know, the show really was about, I wanted people to feel freedom with this idea of play, and I kind of chose artists that I felt like had a similar aesthetic and a similar sensibility of this kind of like quirky, like maybe like, you know, I don't know, like alternative approach to making work that not super shiny, but like, yeah, I want to like get in there, and that's the kind of work that I love, and all the artists in the show do that in such different ways. But Alexander, like many of the artists, like created this beautiful concept that's so much deeper than just this very lighthearted theme, and came up with this idea of creating a sculpture that's sort of like a doll that dresses up. And so I'll let them explain more about that. But it's just such an honor to have you, Alexander, from coming in from Peoria, Illinois. And yeah, I will let you take it away.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun making this piece and doing this work. I have some images to go through this evening that I can show you all. That's a little bit, the beginning of it's a little bit of work for the past few years that led up to this point, just so you can see these relationships, and then some new work. And then after that, I have the video pulled up so I can screen share to show you a little bit of the video so you can see what the sculpture, seeing the sculpture used the way it was intended to be. And so I can't wait to share that with you all. And I'll talk a little bit while the video is going because it has no sound. I hope this file on the computer has no sound. But yeah, when Jessica got a hold of me, last time I was down in Fort Myer, it was the beginning of 2019. I was in an exhibition with Ken Hoffman, who's another artist in Peoria. And it was such a good time. I loved the space. I loved meeting all the people down there. I think it was my first out of town show with multiple pieces in a very long time. And so it was just a super awesome experience. And so when Jessica got a hold of me, I was like, oh, I want to show there again. I would love to make some work, and I really liked this idea of play. And so I made a piece that is about playing with identity and having the space to do that. Because to be able to use that term play, to play with gender, to play with identity, it's coming from a positive space, but not everyone has that opportunity. So it's because of a support network, because of spaces where I felt safe, because of people in my life, a lot of whom are on here this evening, that I felt safe enough to explore this identity, explore this journey, and start making connections. Being an artist, you're lucky enough to have to look at your life every day when you're making work. You're looking at things you've made in the past, you're looking at stuff that you want to make, you're looking at stuff you're working on right now. And so you're always seeing these connections. And so you can sort of see that journey laid out a little bit more directly than I think other people get a chance to. And because you get to play in the studio, you get to go on that journey and go on that exploration. And so that's what this work is about. When I show you all the video, I'll talk a little bit more about the piece specifically. But I wanted to go through the images that I have chosen for tonight. I don't know if Aaron, if you're going to do it, or should I pull them up on here?
Yeah, I can do it if you like, or if you're comfortable with doing it. I've got them pulled up, ready to go.
Sure, if you want to pull them up, then I'll just do it that way.
All right, yeah, I'll run the control board for you. Oh, I just want to add also, I had a young group of artists come in. I think they were probably from one of the local colleges, either Florida Gulf Coast or FSW. We've got two universities nearby. They came in, 3 of them, young emerging artists themselves. I heard them go around the corner and just elated with watching. They watched the whole piece and let it evolve, and I could tell when they got to the end and they had the different elements going on, and we'll get to that. But it was a big moment, so I just wanted to share that with you. It was really a pleasure to.
I'm so happy.
All right, so here I'll jump over to my screen here, and then you just tell me, Alex, whenever you're ready for certain ones and ready to move on, and I'll just hit next. Okay. So just
Okie dokie. While that's getting pulled up, I can give you all a preface. So a lot of the work I make, a lot of the ideas I deal with my work has to do with the intersection of my identities. I sort of grew up in a space of not questioning myself necessarily, but not finding 100% validation from any one community. I grew up biracial. My mother is white, my father is Black. I grew up in a small town in West Virginia, so small town Appalachian person growing up. And so there's a set of cultural values there. I grew up navigating my gender identity, my sexuality, not knowing a lot of these things about myself, but feeling different in that regard. I don't know how else to describe it, as you get like an itch, you feel something. And existing in those spaces and all those in-betweens, I make work now that helps me understand where I exist and can sort of share that moment with others. So I try to make a space for myself in which I can shine, in which I can be, and use my work as a tool to navigate that. Because the reason a lot of people make work is there's certain things you can't put language to. And I love language. I love utilizing language in my practice. I love words. But there's certain things that language can't solve or can't do, and work, art can do that, whether it's music, whether it's performance, whether it's visual. It manifests itself that way. So I, on the technical side of things, I'm trained in printmaking. I got my undergraduate degree at West Virginia University in printmaking, and then I went on to get my MFA at Bradley University. Towards the end of my graduate degree, I started doing a lot more mixed media work and sculptural work because I was using a lot of found imagery in my prints. And so I just started using the objects to make work. And I started playing more. I've always been like tinkering with things, dressing things up, sticking things together. And so I was like, why can't I bring that into a professional sphere? Why can't I bring that into my studio practice? Why am I afraid of being more honest with my work? And so I started doing that. And in doing that, I started learning more about myself and being more honest about myself and my identity. Came out as queer and then came out as non-binary. And my work was sort of reflecting that. So the work I'm having sort of starts after that journey had began. So I'm not going to go back and give you my whole history because you don't need that for it. You could go to my website or something or ask me questions if you want to know about that. But I'm going to show you the work that more directly relates to the piece that I have right now in the show. So if you want to pull up that first image.
I just want to, that was a great preface. Thank you. To see the window and this first piece I'm going to pull up first here is some of the first series that I saw of your work, and I love this tension and the beauty, right? And you're saying this nexus, right? This in between, you feel this beautiful back and forth, and a lot of emotion going forward and backwards, beauty and raw energy, and really, really beautiful experience to encounter and dissect and engage with, right? There's a lot of surprises in your work, and I find that very attractive and just really enjoy to walk through. So yeah, take us through and we'll get started.
Thank you. So this is the work I started doing. I'm sorry, the sun is setting, and so my face is glowing. Let me rotate. So this was the series I started doing towards the end of grad school when I started to experiment more. I was doing a lot of work with containment and packaging. In my 2D work, I was repurposing containers and packaging materials because I like this idea of things we keep, things we hold on to, things that we protect, fragility. But then when I started just using the materials to make work, I was thinking a lot about my own identity and showing more of myself. And like my work in the past used to be like, at the moment I just thought I was making good work, but looking at it now, it was sort of not, I don't want to say passive aggressive, but I was expressing a lot of things but not giving verbiage to them. So I was making work that was like layers of hiding things, hiding parts of myself, hiding opinions on things. But then when I started using packaging materials and making these sculptures, this whole series was called Boys Will Be Boys, because I was looking at masculinity and the structures of masculinity. I was looking at my role in masculinity, like learning to nurture my femininity. I've had it my whole life, and I hid it away and didn't nurture it as much because I was afraid to, like because of the confines of masculinity, because of what people think. If you're assigned male at birth, you have to behave a certain way. I was hiding these things, and it's not a safe space to be. Like, if left in that realm of having to contain them, things can become toxic, things can become bad. It's traumatizing, but if you let it out, you come through shining so much brighter and you're so much stronger. And so this work was looking at that and sort of poking holes in these ideas of masculinity. And so I was using a lot of packaging material, and it was sort of shambly because I'm like, this is a weird structure, this is a weird form. But then when I started sculpting with them, a lot of the early work in this series was a lot of neutrals, like the insides would be pink and glamorous and shiny. But then because I was thinking about contents poking through, but then I started thinking more about like, well, I want to celebrate these parts of myself or talk about these parts of things more so than just talk about how traumatic it is, because it is, and I can use my platform to talk about that, but I can use my art to sort of celebrate things too. It doesn't have to always be about this containment. And so the surface of these things started changing, which actually the work that I showed in Fort Myers last time was from this series, but it was after this sort of switch. So a lot of the sculptures there had a lot more decorative outsides, a lot more ornamentation. This piece in particular is called Him. It's actually about a person I used to date, but I made it for them, like they have it in their possession. The pins in it are just referencing body hair. They aren't like, it's not a negative, this is a positive piece, it comes from a positive place. They still have the sculpture. But a lot of the work in this series was using, again, cardboard, because I was thinking about containment and fragility, but then I started building forms with it and referencing the body, because in understanding identity and navigating self-love, you also start navigating, like that manifests itself not just about your identity, but also like your shape, your body. And so I started referencing the body, like bodies can be big and curvy or thin and wave-like, like there's no wrong way to be in a body. And so to make myself love myself more, I was going to include it in my work. And so this piece is about the person who owns it. But it was when I started, again, experimenting with surface more and using, not showing cardboard for what it is, but trying to transform the material. So this is actually bookboard and cardboard mixed together, which bookboard is just fancy acid-free cardboard. But then it has layers of enamel and paint on it to make it feel almost like ceramic, and more sculptural. But then like the strings and the color and then the hairs reference parts of the people that I was looking at, reference parts of myself. And then if you go to the next slide. Also at this time, I began on this journey with identity. I also started, again, still trained in printmaking, still trained in that 2D realm, started doing a series of collages where I documented my clothing every day, the daily aesthetics. This was actually when I partnered with a friend who's a filmmaker, and she made a documentary about me called The Daily Aesthetics of Alexander Martin that was referencing this series. But it was to explore that idea of clothing and how that reflects identity, not just gender identity, not just things like that, but like clothing expresses a very particular part of ourselves that if we, like if we exist like in a nudist colony, we wouldn't necessarily be expressing those things. There can be cues to gender and identity, but also there can be cues to history, taste, region, culture, mood. Like if you wake up and you just want to be comfortable, you're going to dress, you aren't really thinking about the way it looks, you're thinking about the way it feels, but that looks a certain way. I know, like when I'm lounging around the house, just because clothing is part of my practice, I curate my lounging look. So even though I'm wearing really comfortable clothing, if someone catches me unawares, I'm always photo ready. But it can, like, clothing reflects so much of who a person is. And so I really fixate on that. So for every day, for 100 days, I documented my clothing, wearing a different outfit every day. If you go to the next slide, please. And they all had different names. So the shot you saw before was an installation shot of about 89 of them. I couldn't fit all, there's 100 of them. I couldn't fit all 100. This one is titled Mustard Prints. So it existed at the time, it existed as I was doing Snapchat and other social media where I would take a photo of myself in them and then put it out there, but then use that photo to make the collage. And so they all had ridiculous names because I wanted to explore something like me, myself, starting to understand my own identity and understanding being non-binary. I wanted to explore things outside of the gender binary, like not just masculine and feminine, but what does it feel like to be I think one of them was like 80s crust punk. They all had really ridiculous names. There was like a business witch from the future. Again, this one, Mustard Prince. But all those names were like reflecting identity. Like it was how I felt that day. I have one where I wore this jacket and the title of it was 90s sitcom love interest, because it just looked like something to see like a TV show of the night. Like it was how I felt that morning putting on that clothing, but it was also reflecting something, like something that's not just masculine or feminine, something that is other. And so using clothing to sort of explore language. And in this series, I still, I don't do the collages every day anymore, but I've started making work for other people. People have shared things with me, and even the photos they choose for me to reference adds to my research. I'm like, why do they want this look? What is it about this clothing, this positioning, this day? What is it about this outfit? And so I've made some for other people, but it's exploring. At first it was like a more personal journey, but now it's like understanding what clothing does for everybody and why. Next slide, please. I also experimented with scale and size. This was during my MFA exhibition. Actually, I made a giant wall-sized version. This piece has been installed a few times now, changing slightly each time. But this was the beginning of, technically speaking, this was like the beginning of more found materials, more collection. I hoard supplies. Like my studio practice is very much, I write a lot, and not like coherent writing. It's like word lists, aimless, like sort of automatic writing, and then documenting things, and then I collect. And sometimes I have collected things that sync up with what I'm writing, or vice versa. And then I make work about it. And sometimes they have this perfect intersection. So this was the beginning of like looking at other materials and being like, I can utilize this, I can utilize this. And these are aspects that are still in my practice today. Like this was 3 years ago. And so these are things I still do in my practice today. Next slide. The next few slides are from my series Garden View, which was a series I made after my time spent in the UK. I went there for a residency in 2017 at Tottenham Hill International Studios. And I made a lot of small scale work there, playing with materials, because I didn't want to deal with shipping things internationally. But it was fun knowing, like, I haven't done something where I go to do something smaller and plan for something bigger. So going and keeping a sketchbook, which I always do, journaling, making small paintings and drawings and mixed media pieces to bring back as a reference to make larger scale work. And this was that next step of like, okay, I sort of have found my voice. I have found the visuals of what I want to do, but now how can I change that up? And so when I was in the UK, I was researching queer and Black identity. So like in a country, language reflects culture, and in a country that speaks English all the time, I wanted to know what the differences were there. So with Black identity, I was really fixated on how here we form from diaspora and separation from a home. So Black identity in the US is something, it's the most American identity because it formed here. It's trauma-based because it formed from a separation, but it formed here and developed here. And in the UK, there is still ancestral historical trauma there, but a lot of the people, like their grandparents immigrated or their great-grandparents. A lot of the folks who I interviewed and talked with, they still spoke the language that their grandmother did, or they dress a certain way, they eat a certain food, so they're connected. And like when they would ask me what my identity was, all I had to say was American, and they knew that was my Blackness, like that American was my Blackness. And so that they didn't need any more information than that, because it's assumed that I do not know where my ancestors came from. And then I was also exploring ideas of masculinity and femininity, and what the differences are there, like language-based, like there's terminology we use here within the queer community. Is it the same over there? Is it different? And it is a little bit different, but it's a lot of, which I think is the same everywhere in the world, it's similar. There's a lot of common ground. It's just sort of looked at through a different lens. And so this series, like the cardboard sculptures before, was exploring that with but using bricks and flowers. It was springtime when I was there, and everything was in bloom, and everything's so old. All the buildings are stone or brick, not a lot of wood, which like I grew up with like wood houses and McMansions and other like just weird American architecture that's new. Where over there, it's like London is, don't know how old it is, but it's a very old city, lots of old buildings, and then flowers. So the softness of these flowers and the contrast of the rigidity of these brick and stone sort of birthed this series. Next slide. And so starting to utilize found objects more and thinking about this balance of masculine and feminine energy, again, still sort of existing in that binary or thinking within that binary, but looking at like the confines and the structure of masculine dominated culture, but thinking of like the strength and the resilience of femininity and how everyone has both and the need to nurture both. Next, please. And so lots of found objects. I also was fascinated with fencing at the time. I still am fascinated with fencing, but there was lots of cute little gardens that I was looking at and referencing. This was a piece, it's called Soft Spot. It was slate, like a slate slab with chalk and then a found pillow. So this is when I really started utilizing even more found objects. And then I've always liked flowers. I like floral patterning. I wear them. And so I started putting it in my work. I think in my own mental gymnastics, I was like, ooh, now I have a professional way to put it in my work. But now that I'm sort of breaking down that idea of professionalism, I'm trying to recover from academia and sort of the scar it can leave on you. I am putting, like, this imagery is popping up in my work now just because I like it. And that is, there doesn't have to be any other reason. I like flowers. They represent softness. They can be feminine. They can be masculine. They can be beautiful. They can eat bugs. There's like all kinds of stuff that flowers can do. And I love that versatility. And I just think they're fun to draw plant life. Like, who doesn't love plant life? Like, if you go on anyone's Instagram, there's at least one photo of a window in their house that has a lot of greenery in it. Like, I'm guilty too, and I know a lot of you probably are as well. They're fun. Next slide, please. But this series, Garden View, let me really start using a broad range of materials, a broad range of ideas. This was sort of like an abstraction of the sunset when I was over there. It was like gray and rainy, but you could see the sunlight poking through. And then there's bits of dark glitter with glass chunks that's like the asphalt being reflected. It's like water reflecting off the asphalt, and then the bricks. This exhibition, I filled my friend's car up with bricks. It took 2 trips to the gallery that it was in. But I gave myself permission to use these materials and be like, oh no, this is work. Like, this is good. I feel good about this. This is fun. And that's still like, that's the reason I'm showing you a lot of these older works, is that they all impact the stuff I'm doing now and have sort of given me the strength and confidence to do these things without second guessing my intuition. Next slide, please. And then during the time I was working on this, I was also, again, looking at queer history and doing a series on gay hanky code, which, for those of you who don't know, LGBTQ plus individuals, specifically gay men, in the before, this was common in like 70s, 80s, when it was, you couldn't be as out as you can be now. people would wear these. And so depending on what pocket you wear them in and what color the handkerchief is, what material it is, it signifies different things. A lot of people now within the kink community wear them to sort of celebrate in pride, like what they're into. And so I did a whole series of paintings using these pockets because it's language. I love language. It was like a secret code, and it's part of like it's another part of my history, my cultural ancestry, on the in the history of my queer identity. And so like there's so much intersections between blackness and queerness, and like using the constellations, like on the Underground Railroad, using the constellations and symbols carved into the trees to navigate and to talk to each other over distance silently so you can stay safe. And then with the LGBTQ plus community, colors and flags and things to symbolize stuff that you can secretly share with other folks without being notified, like all of this hidden language. Next slide, please. And so like they're very funny. A lot of them are about, like some of them have long titles, some of them have short ones. The previous one was called Knuckles. I will let you look up the colors on their own, so I don't have to talk about what they mean during this lovely lecture. Next slide, please. Some of them I was just playing, some of them like this one is called We Three Kings, and then in parentheses, while seeking our third gold, if you have a gold handkerchief, depending on what pocket it in, either means you are looking to be the third in an entanglement, or you are looking for a third. And so that's why I have two people wrestling on the front. And then the flower imagery coming back, rhinestones, again, starting to understand this visual vocabulary I'm developing and utilizing it in my pieces. Some of this was actually made while I was in residence at the Prairie Center. I was their program director. It's a residency space that was here in Peoria, and they have old letterpresses. And so these were old, like stamp things they were using for an old poster press. Like middle schools and high schools would have used these to like advertise wrestling club or choir club. And so it's using these to make this piece. Next slide, please. And then that also brings, during this time, I was also working on a series that I'm still doing now called Queer Craft. I do a lot of research on pagan and occult history. It's tied in my ancestry. And I love this idea. At first, I was always fascinated with like strong women in literature. Like I loved The Witch. I loved Ursula as a kid, which like also part of my practice, I perform as a drag queen. So there's definitely some intersections there as to things like Ursula influencing me growing up, divine, people like that. But I loved this idea of these strong people sort of living on the outskirts, living in secret, having a great power that they can't share with everybody for their own safety, but being stronger than those around them. And I see a lot of connections between that and the queer community and the Black community. Again, that language, this language of secrecy. There's lots of things associating witchcraft and like witches with like the night and things hidden in the night or hidden in the forest, secrecy and power. Actually, the terminology of the word queer comes from the same origin as weird, or word, like W-I-R-D, which is like language or like strength, power through manifesting something through your voice, through words, like a spell. And so the series was looking at the history of, at first it was looking at the history of the persecution of LGBTQ plus individuals and the history of like the persecution of women and men, and also LGBTQ plus individuals being burned at the stake or hunted during the witch hunts. And there was a bizarre parallel there. And if you look now, like in popular culture, witchcraft, a lot of people are turning to more pagan practices because the things we've established, the systems we've established have disrupted them. They are disturbed them, like they're noticing flaws. And so they turn to more spiritual practices because it feels more connected to nature. It feels more connected to identity. It exists outside of that, I won't say outside of that mainstream, but like it exists outside of that more organized idea of religion. And so this series was sort of exploring that at first through pieces, like using elements, things that have a magical association, but then mixing them with elements of my own studio practice. Next slide, please. But then I started thinking of, again, I perform in drag, performance is part of my art practice. How can I bring in performance and interaction and share these magical moments with my community? And so looking at my identity and looking at my history and my ancestry as something I can channel to give me power, I was like, why can't I invite other folks to do the same? And so the series, I started doing these interactive pieces where we would do a spell collectively. So this was for affection and protection. People would write communities or people they want to protect and they want to love, and then they would seal them in a wax that I made, and then tie them to a sculpture that I had. Next slide, please. And so I was looking at like Japanese wishing trees that they have in temples where you tie a wish for the new year to a tree. But this is, I still have this piece because a lot of the work from this, I don't feel comfortable with other people having it because it's sacred to me. But this is a tree filled with people's love and affection for communities, for family members. Like I wrote trans women of color on one and sealed it because it's a community that I want to protect, that I want to surround with love. People were writing family members' names, childhood friends that they haven't thought of in a while, and then tying them to the sculpture. Next slide, please. And then a lot of the stuff in the Queercraft series, there's elements of my practice, my studio practice in it as well, to sort of tie in that personal flair. So like the pink string, the glitter that was used to seal these when they were sealed in wax. Next slide, please. This is actually a shot from the second Queercraft performance I did, which was a dance party during the solstice. And it was about bringing in the new and letting go of the old. And I love the idea of like a dance circle. If you go to my website, which is alexanderandrewmartin.com, you can actually watch this video. But I had Paris is Burning, which was a reference to the documentary about the New York ball scene, which is a community for queer and trans Black individuals that they've started by them. If you know voguing, that's where this came from. And so this piece was a magic circle, but I used it as a dance circle. So I invited people to dance on this surface that I had covered in pigment during a ritual where it's like I started and invited other people to do the same. And then throughout the night, we just danced and drank. All the drinks and the food there had herbs in them associated with letting go of the old and bringing in the new. Next slide, please. And this was the piece that came from it. So it was the magic circle or the dance circle. But then inside of it, there are smears and patternings of chalk and other pigments that I left there to track people's movement. So as they were pushing themselves into the new year. The solstice is like a pagan celebration of the new year, pushing themselves into the new year with confident steps forward, and then capturing that moment on this dance circle. Next piece, or next slide, please. And then this was my most recent one, which was called Stability, and it was about grounding yourself, setting up roots, feeling stable and connected to those around you. And so I invited everyone to make a charm that we filled with objects. Like I brought things for people to use, and then everyone brought their own personal objects, but fill it with things that they associate with stability, where they want growth, where they want to feel, where they want to direct their intent, where they want to feel connected, where they want to spread their love. And they filled it in these charms, then we tied it together. And so we were all connected by a string in the circle. We passed scissors around after we said a chant together. We passed the scissors around and snipped them, so we each had our own charm. Because I like these pieces because I like people being able to take something home afterwards. Next slide, please. So this was the charm that came from it. But this one was mine. Different people's look different, but this is one of the charms from the performance. And so now we're sort of getting into where I'm at right now, which I'm still doing the Queercraft series, but I showed you the pieces earlier because that visual information is showing up. I used to, and again, I think it's from being in academia and like my old perception of what professionalism was. I thought everything had to be in series, like everything has to be sort of separated out and organized and like everything needs an explanation. But then I was like, but I like doing these things and I want to bring those elements into other stuff. And so now I'm focusing on who I am as an artist, where I am. Like this work will still have, like, if you go to my website is not really, I mean, it's a portfolio, but it's also like a documentation of where my brain's at. So you could see how I've organized my work, but it's also how I'm organizing my mental space where it's like I still have these series so I can go back and look at them because it's easy for documenting past work. But my work I'm working on right now is under a tab called In Progress, because it's work that is done. The work in there is not in progress, but I am trying to make the work that is Alexander Martin's, the work that is mine, and bringing in all of these elements from my other series and making work not thinking about, like thinking about what I want to do overall, what it means overall, what my work means overall, but focusing in on, but like visually and conceptually bringing in everything. Like anything, as an artist, anything you make is going to be yours. And so I'm trying to break down the rigidity and the structure in my brain. And so the piece I have in plays well with others and the work I'm making now is doing that. The Queercraft series is still going to sort of be a side to that because it's a very specific kind of performance and interaction, and it looks a certain way. So that's always going to sort of be separate, but that idea of ritual, that idea of magic, and that in its relation to like trans and Black identities is going to still be in my main bodies of work. Next slide, please. And so this is the work I'm making now. So I'm being more open about all of my influences. I'm not just trying to be like, okay, I'm looking at this artist, looking at this person, looking at this historical context. I'm looking at things I like. So this piece is entitled Vapor. It's a reference to like vaporwave, which is music and an aesthetic generated completely on the internet, and it's a part of internet culture. But I started listening to music like that when I was in graduate school, and it was like, it had this weird air of nostalgia in it, and it was looking at like old video games, old advertisements from the 80s, and this sort of aesthetic that like I didn't know existed as a kid, but it was surrounding us, and so now this work is sort of making things that are in that aesthetic. But then also bringing in that idea of like layers and queerness and the fluidity of identity. And so my work now is, they're sort of, I mean, they are portraits in a way. Like this is a part of me, and all the work you're seeing is a part of me, and that can be reflected and be a broader interpretation, like a portrait of my community, a portrait of my area, a portrait of my, like where I'm at a certain point in time. So they aren't portraits in the sense of like all of them are visual representations of me, but they all come from, they all can be classified as a part of me, as a reflection of a part of myself. Next slide, please. And so I've started bringing in more materials, referencing my drag, referencing my clothing. All of the things I've shown you up to this point, they're all starting to intersect now. This piece is faux fur, and earrings. Next slide, please. And it's called Luxury. Bringing in glitter again, but now I'm working, I'm using up all of my old glitter that I have, but I haven't bought any new that isn't biodegradable or because glitter is not environmentally friendly, so I've been buying things that are recycled or biodegradable. But this was like glitter and confetti. I've been also exploring, I've always been drawn to sort of a minimal aesthetic, but then a controlled messiness, because like I am messy, I like mess. You can look at like my work has always been sort of crusty or textures and trying to find an aesthetic balance between those two things. So like crisp but gross, balanced but messy. Again, it's sort of a reflection of who I am. Next slide, please. And then bringing in more material. So like this one is, this piece is entitled Singing with My Body, with my curves, my shapes. And it's hair, it's a collection of weave and then my actual hair. And then more, there's a vinyl shower curtain that has water that's printed underneath it. And then that's an actual shower curtain hanging on top. And I used an old canvas that had been gessoed and primed like years ago. But it's picked up the texture, you can't really see it in this photo, but it has picked up the texture of just being abused and tucked away in a basement. And so it's reflective of like bathroom tile, but it's about, again, that idea of body, bringing my body and my work, being more comfortable in my body, like singing in the shower, and like bringing in a lot of those elements from my other pieces in the past. Next slide, please. This one's porch braids. Again, you can see the elements of flowers from like the Garden View series, and that use of fencing. But then there's the fur, jewelry, my hair. I'm starting to use artifacts from my own life, from my interactions with people. Again, hoarding materials to make work, but using these artifacts of my life to make these pieces now that talk about very specific moments in my personal history, or parts where I felt at home in my body or at home with myself, with my identity, or folks around me have felt, sort of capturing these moments. Next, please. This one is called Glam, but it's nails. There's some jewelry, there's a few rhinestones and an earring, and then also this pocket is a leather, my roommate got it for me from a leather shop in San Francisco. So it's a blue leather pocket. And so again, referencing other series I've done, and not trying to sort of curate my headspace, like let honest expression come through and be like, oh, I've used pockets before. I like that association with queer history. I'm going to put that in that work. I like nails. I do drag. I wear my nails. I'm going to put that in my work. I like flowers from this series. These are all things, like the reason I made these series is because I'm drawn to these for some reason visually. And if you set like each of these pieces, I could do like we could sit and talk about the piece for half an hour. We're not going to do that, but we could sit and talk about each individual piece for half an hour. Because they aren't just organized by series anymore. They have all of these elements. So they're about specific moments or specific times, but they have elements from all these things. So I could use this to talk about the history of drag, costuming, theater, and the intersection of like theater and queerness, gay hanky code, and the pockets and the handkerchiefs and the history of that within the LGBTQ plus community. I could talk about Black femininity. You could talk about all these things with each of these pieces because it goes into all of them. And so I am letting myself exist in that space that I exist in and make work in that space without limiting myself. And because of that, my studio practice is a lot more enjoyable, a lot less stress, a lot more honest, and I'm having fun. Is this the last slide? I do not remember. Okay, cool. So it is the last slide. And so the piece that is in Plays Well with Others is about that. So I will show you all a clip of that really quickly. See if I can share screen. Oh, okay, there's my screen. Oh, I have work emails pulled up. So the piece that I made for the show, the exhibition, is entitled, oh gosh, where'd it go? Sorry. It's titled Makeup. I'm sort of going to fast forward to it because it's 15 minutes, but it's playing beside the sculpture in the space, but I wanted to have a video of how to interact with it because I was looking at like dress up dolls and thinking of that. And so it's me. There's actually someone sitting in on the talk this evening who helped me make this, my friend Lise. You can see her hands at the end, but I've collected all these materials, paper scraps, jewelry, bits of hair, and this is going on beside the piece, and I invite people to play with it and dress it up. To dress up the sculpture. And so again, you can see it's cardboard and bookboard and lace, so referencing that because I like those materials and how they reference body. It's packaging materials, it's all of the things I've used. And it's about playing with identity, having a safe and secure space to do that and being able to explore facets of yourself. As a kid, my mom would let me play dress up with my sister. We'd go to my aunt's house. She'd have like loads of clothes laying out. And we would sit and make up identities, make up costumes. Then I would draw a lot of them later. And it was just so much fun. And like now professionally, I am a drag queen. I perform regularly. I'm expressing a part of myself that was sort of hidden away, that I sort of lost in trying to fit into this sort of binary and fit into these sort of strict societal roles. I sort of lost this part of myself. And so this piece is bringing that back and celebrating it. Makeup is it's a bit of a it's a joke, but it's also a reference to like another part of my childhood. see if we can get at the end of this. I just want to fast forward to the end before it loops back. We clap for the sculpture and then have a little runway show. We clap for it. Get out of here and open this back up. I don't know how to stop share. There's a button that says stop share. And so that video is playing with the sculpture, but makeup is a reference to not just makeup, putting on makeup, but also when I was a kid, I used to be obsessed with Sailor Moon. Still am as an adult. It was a huge impact, but like visually, it was like all these girls who would transform into superheroes and fight crime, but it was super queer. Like there's, in the English version, there was people who were cousins. They used the term cousins so it could be palatable to Americans, but they were lovers. There was people like in drag and bad guys and good guys who were like sort of blurring these gender lines. And like, again, this group of girls who like bonded over friendship and would transform into these glamorous superheroes. And I remember like being in the backyard with my sister and pretending to transform and being obsessed with like the ribbons and the lace. And like just the overall glamour of it. And like I used to watch it with my brother because he was a huge nerd. So he was watching things from all over the world, any kind of pop culture, he was observing it. And so I would watch it with him, but I was fixated on it. And going to school, I started and experiencing pressure from other people. I realized that like, oh, not everybody likes these things that are considered more feminine. Sort of had to hide those away and like be ashamed of them. Like I learned shame. I learned shame in the aspects of my identity that I wanted to embrace, the femininity. I felt shame for like my racial identity. Like I never, my mom sort of at first raised us with rose-colored lenses. Like my sister and I were Black, my brother's white, my mom was white. My grandma's family was Native American. There was lots of different people around and like we were just the kids. But then in going to public school, interacting with people, I learned that the way I look, the way I feel is going to be policed by others. And so I learned to break free of that. We all do. And so like this piece is a celebration of that. It's titled Makeup because in that show, whenever they would transform, they would say their name and then say makeup at the end. And then the first thing that would happen is their nails would get painted, which is also why in the video you can see I have a manicure on. I have press-on nails and lots of jewelry to sort of reference that glamour. They were all princesses, so there's also that element in it. They were my version, like a lot of people like Disney princesses. They were my Disney princesses growing up because they also fought crime. And so it's sort of a celebration of all these things, of getting to play dress up and feeling comfortable. Now I get paid to play dress up. So everyone that made fun of me in elementary school, it's like I turned that ridicule into something I can take to the bank and have a good time doing. I can I can paint my nails now whenever I want. I can wear fake nails or get a manicure. I love I like tactile things and texture. You can see that in my work. I remember the first time I ever did drag and I put on press-on nails. I just remember clacking my nails on everything. I'm obsessed with that. Like as a kid, like watching movies with like business women, especially like 80s movies, like the shoulder pads, the short hair, or sometimes the big hair, and then like nails clacking on a keyboard or like nails clacking on a phone. These are just things that like visually stuck out to me my whole life. But now I get to put them in my work and I get to experience them for myself. And so makeup is a sort of celebration of that. And right now it's a really good representation of bringing in all of these parts of myself and also all of these different visual elements that I use in my work and sort of making them into a cohesive thing. It's not a series. I'm not going to use the term series, but like it's me, it's who I am, and it's the work I want to make, which is also why I was super excited for this show because I received the email, like the invitation right in the midst of like I don't know, not a breakthrough, but like this moment of enlightenment with like what I want to do. The last time I had this moment was in grad school. Like we've all had breakthroughs before, but I had a big breakthrough in grad school when I started doing that more sculptural work. And now this past summer, being in quarantine has assisted with this, coincidentally enough, but I had another breakthrough. And then getting this invitation to be a part of the show, it just coincided perfectly. And so I got to play. Like, not only was this is the show about play, but like I got to play making it. My friend and I sat dressing up this cardboard doll for an hour in my living room, laughing while filming it and doing sneaking around the table. I got to go into my studio and start organizing all of my weird collections and materials and using them. And while I was working on this, I was actually working on a lot of the work I showed you towards the end. My newest work made this year. It was all sort of happening at the same time. I've sort of picked up my flow again. And so like this play has sort of translated to everything. Like I'm playing with a lot of different elements now in my work and sort of bringing them all together. Yeah.
Well, that was pretty good. You went right up to the 6:59 right here. It was wonderful to hear you speak about your work and your process. We all give Alexander a silent applause or chime in. Thank you so much. It's so wonderfully revealing to get to experience, hear about your journey as an individual, as an artist, and evolution through all of that. Jessica, do you have anything that you want to add or anything? I mean, some of the things I was just blown away by the material, your use of material. Immersive is a great way to describe your work, or the way I feel with it, looking at your work or sensing it, right? Like immersive, you hit every sense: texture, color, emotion, history, social context. I mean, it's just overwhelming. It's like a floodgate, and it's beautiful because it's so simple and so seemingly harmless, but it reveals itself to you ever so gently and welcomes you in. And that's an accurate way to describe it. It's just, there's a lot of emotion there. And some of the things you were saying about, hiding it and revealing it and seeing that, I remember some of those pieces you were talking about, the cardboard and the glitter on the inside and this beautiful core, wanting to pour out. And I think we're seeing that. And it's amazing to, watch your work progress. And it is, I don't think it's a series, it phases so much, or it's all the same, right? How do you need to do these other things to balance out? But I'm sure there's a lot more.
It's actually how I like the description you use there, because it's how I lure people in real life. Like I do a lot of education and advocacy and a lot of work and activism within my communities. And it's like, if you have a approachable exterior, you can get a lot more conversation. Like it takes a certain kind of patience. Like it's no one's job to be approachable, but if you lure them in a certain way, then you can have the really hard conversations. And so I try to do that with my work too.
A gentle embrace.
Yes.
Yeah. And redirection. Well, anybody else in the audience have anything to, Jessica, do you want to chime in there?
Yeah, I'll just chime in quick and maybe ask a question and then leave it to the audience too if you guys have anything. Thank you so much for sharing, and Aaron, great image MC there, and you always have such good feedback. I'm always impressed with that. Yeah, it's just, as you were talking, it sort of like clicked with me why I'm so drawn to your work, and that's that you're so connected to adornment and
Yeah.
having a background in jewelry. I'm like, oh, okay, this
Yeah.
And also that I think everything you're making is like also about community and relationships, and I really love that about your work and about you as an artist, and that your practice sort of extends beyond the studio, that you have this drag performing, and you have you do so much community work and activism, and it's all sort of melded, and then creating these kind of interactive immersive installations that are part of your studio practice. And I think that's, you know, becoming more normalized in a sense, but that I think it's so important. You know, myself as an artist with like different interests and different ways of bringing that practice, that we don't have to define it in these categories. It's kind of all, it's all the good stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then just I was just kind of like taking notes, trying to remember some things, but you were talking about your loungewear, and I was just seeing you posted a picture of yourself camping, and it was like the most fabulous camping outfit I've ever seen. So I'm down for, I feel like, a closet tour you're offering.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just I guess my question would be, you know, with so much of your work being community based and having that such a strong element, like, I mean, I imagine, and obviously the pandemic's been hard on everybody, but just to say, like, how has that really influenced your practice and, you know, community?
I with the pandemic, which I always hate saying this because it's a very traumatizing time for everybody. But studio practice wise, and like it is, and mental health wise, aside from anxiety, removing anxiety from that, because every time I leave my house, I am so paranoid. But it's given me so much space to heal, like heal from past trauma, heal from, because it's like there's months, like now I'm back to work with precautions in mind, but it's like there's months where I'm sitting around the house and not even forcing myself to make. Like I started playing. If you follow me on social media, I have a section on my the stories that you can store at the top called sketches, and those were made in quarantine. But I was just playing with all the crap we have around our house, and so I started playing, and I was reading more. I was playing video games again. I love video games. I'm a huge nerd. I was playing video games again as a escape and as a way to like enjoy myself. And it made me see how much of the pressure I had put on myself, like during graduate school, was an illusion. Like it's this, again, this idea of professionalism, this idea of success that we all see in our various fields. And like, anybody who's gone through art school, you feel like, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. And now I'm like, well, wait a minute. The moment I stop giving a damn, pardon my French, my work started getting better. And the pandemic really taught me that. And then also with everyone being home, the plights that my communities face have become more apparent because people have had to sit with it. Like I had a lot of people reach out to me during after George Floyd. A lot of people reach out to me and be like, "How are you doing? What's going on?" And like, I appreciated it, but also like that's every month for me in my community. Like a lot of my queer and Black friends were like, "Oh, I mean, it's horrible, but like this happens all the time." And so now other people are being more aware of that because like the 9-to-5 grind, the push for professionalism, all this stuff that distracts us, we aren't distracted by it anymore. We don't have time to be. And so now people are ready to engage in these conversations. And so that's also helped my work and my practice during this. It's like I can make more work that's honest. I can make more work that's about my identity, and it's a celebration. Now that people are getting more turned into issues involving LGBTQ plus justice and race and racial inequality and systematic racism, there's a lot of sort of torture porn of like Black bodies being assaulted and killed, or like Black trans women being killed. And like I see that every day, and not everyone has to see that. You can celebrate us while we're alive and there's a space to do that. And so this pandemic has given me time to make work that is honest, and it has that history. It has those layers of like, we can get into some more serious conversation about racial inequality or prejudice or homophobia or colorism or like all these different things. There's lots of stuff we can get in conversation about, but also it's a celebration of life and identity, and people are ready to engage in it. And so I can have a lot more, I can show a piece that has like a sculpture with some loose weave and nails glued to it and a bunch of jewelry pierced to it, and people will start asking the right questions. And so it's been, again, anxiety and stress aside that we're all facing, and that sense of disconnect in that regard, that aside, it's been a very good time to heal and make work. Which I always feel a little bit guilty saying that because it is an international crisis, but I think everybody needs a pause every once in a while to see what's important, to sort of see those things. And this has given us all time to do that.
I think that's very well put. I think it's very true that it's very easy to suppress a society when you keep them so busy that they don't have time to think. Yeah, and giving ourselves the freedom to play, which your work does so well, and opens all of our eyes to the beauties of being a child and growing up without, outside influence and shame and these things that we learn throughout, our experience of becoming adults, and help focus, like you said, on us, be in our dwellings and our nests here and holding up and having to live with ourselves, and better or worse, move forward. Let's see. I think we're just a little past 7 o'clock. Any of our other guests have any questions or anything to ask? Alexander, it was so amazing to hear more about your work and get that window into your life as an artist. And I look forward to following more of your work as this new series emerges. I'm so excited to see the new pieces as they come out. I'm very happy for you and your new discoveries. And I wish you the best with all the projects that you have going. I know you've got a lot of different things, and checking out your website, the Y art sale and the Project 1612, and these really cool looking things that you've got going on in the community. So we'll post this. I'll get this video sort of cleaned up, and we'll put it online, and I'll send you a link, and everybody, so other people that weren't able to make it tonight can enjoy. I think we covered some really great topics that are very important to all of our communities across, and it's such a pleasure to have your work in the gallery here at the Alliance for the Arts on our behalf. I thank you, and thank Jessica Todd for bringing this show to our community and sharing the work with the people who it means a lot to them to come in and see this work in a space and in this environment right now, and where we live and here in Southwest Florida. So thank you again.
Thank you. I was gonna say thank you so much. Like, it was, I mean, it's a really good time, and it's been so fun working on this show, and being in contact with you both and seeing the updates. And it's the first time I felt this connected to an exhibition that's this far away without being there in person. It's been a super good time in all regards. And so thank you so much for having me. It's been a wonderful experience.
Anytime. I look forward to some new projects. We'll keep you in mind. We'll work on something. So get the artist exchange going. I got some St. Pete artists I'll send your way too, and Jessica's getting established up there as well. So I just saw some fun things come out on social media just this past week. So we'll be in touch, and thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful weekend.